Webb's depth of knowledge. So, why should teachers use Webb's depth of knowledge? The bar for student achievement continues to be raised and requires rigorous instruction. It helps to increase student achievement. For example, you may learn about soccer by simply watching a game. However, you would not have the mastery that a coach would have. Teachers should aim for absolute mastery of understanding when it comes to their students. For students to achieve in schools today, they need to fully understand. So, what is Webb's depth? Depth of understanding requires basic knowledge, conceptual understandings, integration, and evaluation. Depth of knowledge can be defined as complexity of thinking. Now, what depth of knowledge should not be confused with is difficulty, which may vary from person to person. Webb's, on the other hand, focuses on the kind of thinking required, not the difficulty. Different parts of the brain are used for different methods of thinking. Now, when should educators use Webb's depth of knowledge? A common misconception is that Webb's is not meant for lower grade levels. But Webb's depth of knowledge can be incorporated into the classroom at any grade level. It can be used by a kindergarten teacher just the same as it can be used by a 12th grade teacher. Webb's depth of knowledge should be considered when assigning tasks or activities for your students. A test should be built on various levels of Webb's depth of knowledge. Webb's depth of knowledge is broken down into 4 different levels. Each level representing a different complexity of cognition. You have level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. Now, let's explore level 1. Recall and reproduction. The first example of recall and reproduction would be to identify the steps in the water cycle. Students may simply fill in a worksheet on the steps. The next example is having students recognize the definitions of various terms. So imagine students completing matching item questions. Plugging in numbers to solve an equation is another example. Say they plug in mass and acceleration simply to find the force. Lastly, for level 1, maybe simply list examples of protists. All that really requires is being able to reproduce the names of the protists. Level 2, skills and concepts. So the first example would be maybe analyzing the cause and effects of weapons advancement. How did tanks impact World War II, for example? The next example would be maybe to compare viruses to living organisms. Are viruses living organisms? What do they have in common? What is similar? What is different? Combine concepts to solve multiple step problems. Think, for example, maybe an area problem where you have to take the areas of various different objects. Lastly, for level 2, summarize the evolutionary theory. Students have to think and recognize all the concepts that are associated with the theory of evolution. Level 3, strategic thinking. Argue using evidence that is cited. You would want your students to cite the evidence as they perhaps debate or have classroom arguments. Next, hypothesize the next steps in an experiment, where students have to strategically think. Another example would perhaps be explain how parts of a mechanism work as a whole, where students have to imagine how each individual part has an effect on all other parts. And the last example, create scientific models to explain a concept. Students there have to project ideas into visuals. And the last level, level 4, which is extended thinking. And the first example would be creating a nutritional video on the best choices for healthy living. This is a project where students have to create and combine a number of different skills. Next up, make connections across different content and subject. This will relate to cross-curricular instruction, integrating different subjects such as math and social studies. Have students submit an article for a local newspaper, but it doesn't have to be a local newspaper. Perhaps it could just be the school's newspaper. And lastly, design a scientific experiment to be carried out and tested. And this last example really combines a number of different levels. So right now I would like to say thank you for your time. Please like, please share, and please subscribe to this channel.